All right, today we are getting into something that is, well, it's pretty alarming. We're going to connect the dots between two really powerful ideas you might have heard of, algorithmic complacency and this phenomenon that people are now calling brain rot. We're going to break down what they are, see how they're linked, and, most importantly, figure out what it all means for our ability to think. So let's just dive right in.
But before we go any further, I want to ask you something. Do you have a forgotten superpower? Now, I know that sounds a little dramatic, but the sources we're digging into today make a really compelling case that, yeah, you almost certainly do. And the scary part is, you've probably been trained to forget you even have it.
So, how do we find this forgotten superpower? Well, we've got to put a skill to the test, a skill that's been lying dormant. This first section is all about rediscovering that ability, one that's incredibly powerful, but seems to be, fading away for a lot of us.
Okay, so imagine this. I give you one single photo of an old vintage radio. The challenge: find out its exact model, the years it was made, and the full repair schematic. What's so cool about this slide is how it breaks down the process. You don't just stare at it, you observe. You notice the brand name, Silvertone, and you see FM on the dial. Then, and this is key, you craft a precise search. Not "what is this old radio," but "vintage Silvertone FM radio." That precision is what gets you the unique identifier, the Silvertone Model 18. And once you have that key, boom, one last search and you've excavated everything. Schematics, production years, all of it. The whole thing can be done in under a minute. That is the superpower. Focused, active, human-led research.
And that brings us to the real heart of the issue here. The reason a challenge like that might seem tough is because we are, as a society, systematically training ourselves out of that active role. We've gone from being these active excavators of data to just passive recipients, waiting for information to be fed to us. And that passivity, that is the front door to our next big topic.
Right? So this big shift from being an active excavator to a passive consumer, it actually has a name. So let's get clinical for a second and make a formal diagnosis. We're going to define exactly what this complacency is and take a look at the machinery that's driving it.
And here it is. The sources call it algorithmic complacency. I want you to really think about that phrase, a subconscious surrender of your personal agency. This isn't just about being lazy. It's the habit of defaulting to the algorithm, letting it pick what you see, what you read, what you do. It's a quiet, slow giveaway of your own control.
And this slide just perfectly lays out the difference. Remember the old manual internet? You were the curator. You were in charge. You chose your sources. You made bookmarks. You did the intellectual heavy lifting. Now, in the age of the algorithmic feed, the user is often a captive. The platform chooses for you. It directs your attention not for your own good, but for its profit, pushing you towards passive scrolling instead of active choosing.
And if you want to see the proof of this surrender in black and white, well, the data is just staggering. One creator shared their analytics, and look at this. The subscriptions feed, the list of channels you explicitly chose to follow, made up only 3% of their views. The other 97%, all from the algorithm. The tool for personal choice is sitting right there, but we've overwhelmingly picked the algorithm slot machine instead.
This is probably my favorite analogy from all the source material. It's just perfect. Your subscriptions feed is like your own personal, curated magazine rack. You picked every single one. But the algorithm feed? That's like being in a chaotic airport lounge where some stranger's just chucking random angry magazines at your head, just trying to get a reaction. The entire intent behind them is worlds apart.
Now, this behavioral shift, it's not just some bad habit we've picked up. It's actually causing measurable physical damage to our brains. So let's take a look at the neurological fallout from all this.
Let's just start with a huge number that kind of frames the scale of this problem. 210 million. According to recent findings, that's the estimated number of people worldwide who are suffering from a behavioral addiction specifically tied to social media. And to really put that number into perspective, let's compare it to something else. The UN estimates that around 64 million people have traditional substance use disorders. Let that sink in. A technology that's barely been around for 2 decades has created a dependency problem that's more than 3 times larger than the one from centuries of known addictive drugs. The result of all this is, well, it's pretty stark. This constant hunt for the next dopamine hit from a notification or a new video has absolutely gutted our ability to focus. Research shows that the average human attention span has cratered, dropping from a pretty respectable 2.5 minutes back in 2003 to just 47 seconds today.
And all of this leads to a really dangerous new idea the sources are calling cognitive debt. Just think of it like this. It's the price you pay for outsourcing your own thinking. There was this wild MIT study that found students who used ChatGPT to write their essays showed almost flat brain activity. They felt like they did the work, but when they were asked to summarize their own arguments just a few minutes later, they couldn't. The knowledge never actually made it into their brains.
You know, this isn't some niche academic theory anymore. The problem has gotten so pervasive, it's actually broken through into our mainstream culture in a huge way. The Oxford Dictionary's 2024 word of the year is, you guessed it, brain rot.
And the real-world consequences, especially when you look at kids, are just terrifying. I mean, these aren't just statistics anymore. These are straight-up withdrawal symptoms. We're seeing everything from extreme violence when a phone is taken away, to a child completely ignoring her own birthday party, to a total loss of self-control on a plane. These are the physical signs of a deep chemical dependency.
Okay, I know that was incredibly bleak. But here's the good news. After diagnosing the problem, the sources switch gears to a really empowering solution-based recovery plan. The point is, we are not helpless in this.
So, the sources lay out 5 concrete, actionable steps you can take to fight back. First up, go grayscale on your phone. It sounds small, but it directly attacks the main visual reward system in your brain, making your phone instantly less of a shiny toy. Second, set app limits. You need to create friction to break the dependency cycle. Third, protect your sleep. That's totally non-negotiable for brain repair. Now, the fourth one is maybe the hardest, but also the most important. You have to tolerate boredom. Even just 30 minutes a day with no stimulation forces your brain's fried dopamine system to reset. And finally, practice gratitude. This trains your mind to find validation from within instead of from likes and notifications.
So, for our last section, let's just zoom all the way out and look at the bigger picture here, the broader societal impact of our kind of uncritical relationship with all this tech. And this isn't just about kids on social media. One of the sources has this perfect example with GPS. An adult's daily commute app suggested a route that saved exactly 1 minute. But the trade-off? It added an extra 2,000 miles of driving and cost $500 in tolls over the year. We just blindly default to the quote-unquote fastest route without ever stopping to apply basic human logic, and we end up losing time, money, and even our connection to the towns we live in.
And that right there brings us to the central, giant paradox of this whole thing. We're in the middle of building these incredibly complex AI systems that absolutely require intense, thoughtful, critical human supervision to keep them from going off the rails. And yet at the very same time, through this algorithmic complacency and brain rot, we are actively destroying the very cognitive skills we need to do that job. Which leaves us with one final and pretty chilling question. Are we creating a future full of problems that only smart, focused humans can solve, while simultaneously making ourselves incapable of being those humans? Are we creating a digital labor gap that we can no longer fill? And that's the thought I want to leave you with.